𝗧𝗍𝗱𝗱𝗏, also known as Al-Lat or Al-Lat, was a pre-Islamic Arabian goddess revered for her associations with war, peace, combat, and prosperity. She was one of the three principal goddesses worshipped in Mecca by Meccan pagans before the rise of Islam. Alongside Al-Uzza and Manit, her cult was widespread across the Arabian Peninsula and extended as far as Syria. Linguistically, her name means the goddess, the feminine counterpart, a divine feminine complement of Allah, the God. This reflects a deeper conceptual structure in pre-Islamic religion, where divine male and female aspects were paired. The word Allah comes from the contraction Al-Ilah, meaning the God in Arabic. The root glottal stop, which sounds like a catch in the throat, followed by L and H, to worship or divinity, is the same Proto-Semitic root as El in Hebrew, Il in Ugaritic, and Ilu in Akkadian. These three letters form the basis for words like Ilah, meaning God, and Allah, meaning the God. This root is the linguistic foundation that ties these words together. All major Semitic languages derive their term for God from this root. Linguistically, Allah and El come from the same ancient Semitic root for God, and in that sense they share the same linguistic archetype for God. The term archetype here, the foundational or original concept that later forms and variations grow out of. Allah and El both descend from the same ancient template of the word for God, an underlying linguistic archetype that shaped how Semitic peoples conceptualized the divine. In some traditions, Al-Lat was described as a daughter of Allah, and was closely associated with the sun. In most ancient religions around the world, including Mesopotamia, Egypt, and much of the Near East, the sun was typically perceived as male and the moon as female. In much of pre-Islamic Arabia, this pattern was reversed. The moon was worshipped as male, and the sun was worshipped as female. Her sacred symbol was the lion, representing power and protection, and her main cult object was a cubic stone at 𝗖𝗆𝗱𝗏 near Mecca. The cube in Al-Lat worship was a sacred object. Historical sources describe it as a cuboid-shaped stone that served as a focus of ritual reverence. It was not merely symbolic, but considered a physical representation or embodiment of the goddess herself. Some scholars suggest the cubic shape had symbolic significance, possibly representing stability, cosmic order, or a divine axis, a theme echoed in other ancient religions, where geometric forms symbolize sacred truths. A cube unfolded in geometry produces a net of 6 squares, and if connected symbolically, these shapes can be arranged to reflect deeper patterns from a mystical or symbolic perspective. Unfolding a cube can connect to forms like the 6-pointed star and the cross. The 6-pointed star to interlocking triangles with 3 vertices each, represented by the number 33, has deep symbolism in many traditions, representing harmony between opposites, masculine and feminine, spirit and matter. The cross, emerging from the cube's geometry, is a universal archetype tied to intersection points, the meeting of divine and material realms, the axis mundi, world axis, or a point of sacred convergence. For pre-Islamic Arabia, such symbolism could connect to the cube's role as a sacred, divine object, a microcosm of the universe. Offerings, including animal sacrifices, were made in her honor until her cult was suppressed after the Muslim conquest of Mecca in 630 CE, when the Prophet Muhammad ordered her idol destroyed. Astarte, the Canaanite and Phoenician goddess of fertility, sexuality, and war, was the Western form of Mesopotamian Ishtar and Sumerian Inanna. She was associated with the planet Venus, the crescent moon, bull horns, and fertility symbols, and was regarded as the consort of 𝗆𝗏𝗱𝗏, the storm and fertility god, embodying his feminine complement. In Nabatean and wider North Arabian belief, Dushara was often regarded as the chief male deity, and his female consort was identified with Al-Uzza, Al-Lat, or Manit, depending on region and period. These goddesses, however, are all local manifestations or continuations of the older Canaanite Amorite goddess Astarte, who herself was a later development of Ishtar and Lat. By the late 1st millennium BCE and into the early centuries CE, Arabian deities such as Al-Lat became intertwined with northwest Semitic and Hellenistic goddesses through trade and cultural exchange. Inscriptions from Nabatea, Petra, and Palmyra equate Al-Lat with Aphrodite. Athena and Astarte, the Palmyrene temple of Al-Lat, built in the 2nd century CE, contained a famous lion statue protecting a gazelle, a potent symbol of fertility and guardianship, reflecting her dual role as both protector and life-giver. In Hatra, northern Mesopotamia, Al-Lat appears alongside deities such as Nabu and Shamash, illustrating her absorption into the broader Mesopotamian pantheon. Much like Astarte's, through this process of syncretism, Al-Lat became the Arabian manifestation of Astarte Ishtar, while Olusa mirrored Aphrodite Venus, and Manit paralleled Nemesis or Fate. Astarte Ishtar was the consort of 𝗆𝗏, just as Al-Lat, in her local Arabian form, was understood as the consort of 𝗧𝗆𝗶𝗁𝗆, who represented Baal. This pairing completed the sacred masculine and feminine polarity of the pre-Islamic Arabian pantheon. 𝗧𝗆𝗶𝗁𝗆 as the celestial bull, storm, vitality, and strength, and Al-Lat Astarte as the radiant Venus, embodying fertility, love, and celestial power. Their union reflected the same cosmic structure that defined Canaanite, Phoenician, and Mesopotamian religion, a structure later reinterpreted and subsumed under the monotheistic unity of Allah in Islam, just as Yahweh in Israelite religion absorbed El and Baal through syncretism. An archetype is a universal symbol, theme, or pattern of thought that recurs across cultures and time, a kind of primordial template in the human psyche. It's a concept from psychology, mythology, and philosophy that describes fundamental ideas or figures that are part of collective human experience. The term was popularized by Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, who argued that archetypes exist in the collective unconscious, a shared mental space containing inherited memories and ideas common to all humanity. Key aspects of an archetype include universal, found in myths, religions, stories, and symbols across cultures, timeless. They appear in human thought and storytelling from ancient times to modern times. Symbolic. They represent fundamental human experiences, emotions, or concepts. Examples include: the mother symbolizes nurturing, creation, protection, for example Sumerian Inanna, Mesopotamian Ishtar, Canaanite Phoenician Astarte, Egyptian Isis, Christian Mary, Al-Lat in pre-Islamic Arabia, etc. The hero embodies courage, transformation, and self-sacrifice, for example Jesus, Moses. The shadow represents the darker aspects of humanity, for example Satan, Lucifer, Set, or the concept of evil in general, the divine. The archetype of ultimate unity or higher being, for example God, El, Allah. Adam Kadmon is an archetype in Kabbalah, the primordial human, a cosmic blueprint of creation. Similarly, Allah or El could be seen as archetypes of the one God, universal representations of the singular divine essence, expressed differently in various religious traditions. In Canaanite religion, El was the supreme creator godfather of gods and men, whose consort was Asherah. El was seen as the distant, all-powerful creator, while 𝗆𝗏𝗏 was the active storm god, the bringer of fertility. This structure, a high, abstract creator god, above a pantheon, became foundational for later Semitic religions. By the 1st millennium BCE, these ideas spread southward. Among North Arabian tribes, there was a belief in a high god named 𝗍𝗏𝗏 or Al-Lat, above the local tribal deities, just as El was above the Canaanite pantheon. So the pre-Islamic Allah was already functioning much like El, a distant high god, creator, not represented by idols, while other gods like 𝗧𝗆𝗶𝗁, Al-Lat, Al-Lat, and Manit were more directly worshipped intermediaries. When Islam arose in the 7th century CE, it reasserted the exclusive worship of Allah, removing all intermediaries. This mirrors how Israelite religion evolved. Yahweh, originally a local form of El, came to absorb El's identity as the God of Israel, while all other deities were rejected as false. Thus, just as Yahweh equals El in Hebrew religion, so Allah equals Al-Lat, which equals the El-type high god in Arabia. The Arabic word Ilah literally means a god, deity, or object of worship. It comes from the Proto-Semitic root Allah, which means to worship, to be filled with awe, to deify. This same triliteral root appears all across the Semitic language family. Ugaritic, Il, meaning God, Hebrew, El, meaning God, and Elo, meaning a god. Aramaic, Syriac, Allah, meaning God, Akkadian, Ilu, meaning God. Arabic, Ilah, meaning God. All of these words are cognate. They descend from a common ancestral Semitic term meaning divine being or the object of worship. Arabic adds the definite article al, the, to make Al-Lat, literally the God. In everyday speech, Al-Lat contracted to Allah, the same way English, the plus apple, can become 𝗲𝗡𝗄 if spoken quickly. So, Allah isn't a name at first. It's a title meaning the God, the supreme or ultimate deity. Among North Arabian and Nabatean tribes, stretching from northern Arabia to Petra and Palmyra, inscriptions mention both Ilah and local gods like Dushara, Al-Lat, and Manit, but Ilah often appears in contexts implying a high god above the others, a creator or sky god, distant and abstract. This religious structure is identical to the Canaanite model, where El was the father of gods, with Baal and Astarte serving as active deities under him. So by the late pre-Islamic period, Ilah in general equals a god, Al-Lat equals the god, the supreme one above all others. Different tribes called on local gods, but still recognized Al-Lat as the creator or source, a distant, overarching deity not tied to a single idol. This henotheism, many gods, but one supreme one, is the stage of religion that Islam later transformed into strict monotheism. So Ilah and El the same root and same concept, separated by geography and time. When Islam proclaimed La ilaha illa Allah, there is no God but the God, it was linguistically and conceptually saying exactly what Hebrew monotheists meant by 𝗍𝗆𝗆𝗶𝗴𝗲𝗏. There is no God besides El. Allah and the Canaanite El of the same deity concept. Both Canaanites and pre-Islamic Arabians had the concept of one high God, El or Al-Lat, as the ultimate source. The names differ because of language, El in Northwest Semitic, Ilah in Arabic, but the root concept is shared. This is where religion gets complex. To the Canaanites, El was part of a pantheon, El, Baal, Astarte, Anat, etc. El was the father of the gods, but not necessarily worshipped as the only god. To the Arabians, in pre-Islamic Arabia, Al-Lat was also part of a pantheon, alongside deities like 𝗧𝗆𝗆𝗁, Al-Lat, and Manit. Most tribes were polytheist or a henotheist, worshipping a chief god, alongside other gods. So Canaanites and Arabians were not speaking about the same exclusive single god, but they were speaking about a shared concept of a supreme divine authority, El, Al-Lat. This supreme god was part of a larger pantheon in both traditions, although the details differed. What Islam did was radically change the concept. Islam took Al-Lat, elevated him, and declared he alone exists. La ilaha illa Allah. There is no God but Allah. This stripped away the rest of the pantheon entirely, making Allah not just the chief god, but the only God. This was a theological shift from henotheism, one God above others, to strict monotheism. But the name Allah still carried the heritage of Ilah. El, Allah, is linguistically and conceptually the same as the Canaanite El, representing the ancient Semitic idea of a supreme God. But Canaanites and Arabians worship this god differently, in polytheistic contexts. In a way, El in the Canaanite tradition, and Allah in Islam can be seen as different expressions of the same archetypal reality, much like 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗏𝗄 in Kabbalah is an archetype of the primordial divine human. Here is how that works conceptually. El is the ancient northwest Semitic archetype of the high god, the father of gods, the universal principle of divinity, the transcendent source of creation. Al-Ilah, Allah, in pre-Islamic Arabia was the linguistic and cultural continuation of that archetype, the supreme god above the tribal pantheon. Allah in Islam is the fully realized monotheistic embodiment of that archetype, not one among many, but the singular, eternal God of the universe. This makes Allah and El just linguistically linked but conceptually manifestations of the same archetypal divine principle, the idea of a singular ultimate God that transcends names and cultures. Just as 𝗧𝗿𝗱𝗏𝗏 is the archetypal first man in mystical thought, Allah is the archetypal first God, a universal divine identity that different cultures have expressed in their own languages, myths, and forms of worship. Abraham is considered the father of the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, because he is seen as the founding patriarch who first entered into a covenant with God, establishing the spiritual foundation for these faiths. Historically, Abraham is described in biblical tradition as originating from the ancient city of Ur, a Sumerian urban center in Mesopotamia, and as belonging to Amorite Canaanite culture. He grew up in a polytheistic, pagan environment where multiple gods were worshipped, and where practices such as child sacrifice were part of certain religious rites. His life represents a dramatic turning point, leaving his homeland and rejecting the prevailing paganism. Abraham embraced the worship of a single God, laying the groundwork for monotheism and shaping the moral and spiritual core of the Abrahamic traditions that would follow. In Islamic tradition, Abraham is considered one of the greatest prophets and a spiritual ancestor, the father of Islam, because he exemplified pure monotheism and submission to one God, Allah. Islam teaches that Abraham worshipped the same singular divine reality that Muslims call Allah. From a historical linguistic perspective, Allah is the Arabic word for the God, and is rooted in the same Semitic tradition as the Hebrew name El and Elohim and the Canaanite concept of a high God. So, in a sense, Abraham's worship of El or Yahweh is viewed in Islam as worship of the same God, but expressed in different languages and theological frameworks. For Jews, God is named Yahweh. For Christians, God is the Father revealed in Christ, and for Muslims, God is Allah, the same eternal divine being worshipped by Abraham, just understood in the Islamic monotheistic framework. Put simply, Abraham's worship of 𝗖𝗆𝗆𝗏𝗍 is seen as part of the same spiritual lineage that Islam continues, Allah being the name for that one God in the Arabic language and Islamic theology.